Galbrena, the angel of death, the messenger of God, the one who is not your savior, but shall burn away lament, fear, and despair all the same with hellfire itself. Hello and welcome, I'm KraNis, and today we're going to discuss Galbrena, from her predictions to her echo set and even her kit all together. I will attempt to piece together what information we have of her, so let's go ahead and dive into the Black Shore's latest resonator. Did I just say the Black Shores? That's right. Special thanks to Life Lessons Gaming for spotting the differences in her drip marketing, one of which includes a Blake bloom on her left arm, meaning that Galbrena is likely part of the Black Shores. Speaking of flowers, however, let's go ahead and talk about the stone roses in Murmurstown. These Sanguis Plateaus have 3 resonator ascension materials, one for Augusta, Yuno, and a third individual. It is my belief that Galbrena will use these, so go ahead and collect a few while you log on each day just in case. Now then, the question remains, why do these exist in Murmurstown specifically? As of late, flowers have had some kind of a link to the characters themselves. So what do these stone roses have in common with Galbrena? Well, it's rather simple. What important characters do we know are from Fabianum? We have Augusta, Avidius, and Angel. To further drive the connection home, Galbrena is inspired by the name Gabriel, which is, of course, an archangel. Furthermore, we have Galbrena proclaiming her return to Septimont itself.
It's been a while, Rinesita.
Harkening back to my original prediction video, I said that I was hoping that Galbrena would be a Spectrogun user, but that fusion also made sense due to, well, all of the fire in her art. In that video for the Galbrena section, I speak about blue flames being both associated with hell due to sulfur burning blue, but also that blue flames themselves symbolize in both Christianity and Rome a cleansing, purity, and are holy, giving us a sort of duality. Well, it might not be holy, but we do have a Chorosaurus that gives us fusion and echo skill damage bonus. Right, so let's go ahead and talk about her kit and what it likely entails. Very obviously, it will likely deal with echo skill damage based on the Law of Harmony set, the Chorosaurus, and of course all of the echoes we see in her drip marketing. We don't have any fusion resonators who can make use of the Chorosaurus, but considering all of the echoes present in her marketing, I think it's safe to assume that she will. In addition to this, we have the Law of Harmony set, which provides heavy attack and echo skill damage bonuses in a 3-piece. But the wording is very unique. You see, it says echoes of the same name can only trigger this effect once, meaning you need 4 separate echo skills of different names, and well, we can see a serpent, a goat-like creature, a Dullahan, and what appears to be a harpy. She might cycle through these echoes in her attack chains, or only present during specific actions. For example, one could be her intro and outro, one for her skill, another for her liberation, and finally one for her forte. This is what I think will likely be the outcome. The main question, however, is how does she have all of these echoes? Are they tied to her? We don't see a terminal on her, so they're likely just part of her forte itself, like Loaf and Hecate, or perhaps like Rover and Abby. I see this in one of 2 ways, and let me know which one you believe is more accurate down below. And of course, I will be pulling heavy inspirations from Jungian psychology. Assuming that Angel is Galbrena, we can work with what we know what happens inside of the Dark Tide. Thanks to an in-game achievement, we already know that inside of the Dark Tide itself, it's called Chaos. And thanks to Augusta, we also see it's similar to the Underworld. In other words, it is hell, not paradise that Leviathan offers people. We also see that people exist within it, their minds and souls fractured and yearning. Augusta may have had dozens of people latch onto her during the fall of Fabianum, turning into the helpful whispers. But what about Galbrena? With all of that power, surely she would have been a bright beacon inside of the Dark Tide itself. We know that the Dark Tide holds the collective unconscious of Rinesita itself, with the false sovereign being Septimont's shadow. With this in mind, perhaps each entity we see with Galbrena represents something inside of Septimont, both good and bad, or perhaps just more generally offers symbolism behind who she is and what her resonance ability is. We see the Dullahan, which is a hunter, a symbol of the finite amount of life you have, and a symbol of finite ego and self. They showcase imminent death, misfortune, and the idea you cannot escape death itself, much like what the Dark Tide represents to Septimont and, honestly, the Lament as a whole across all of Solaris 3. That no matter how much you train, fight, no matter how hard you scream, all you can do is slow down the march of death, but never truly stop it. However, if the Dullahan has marked you for death, then there is no true escape, only the relentless pursuit until you perish, much like how the Dark Tide seemed to act when hunting down Angel herself, and perhaps a showcasing of Galbrena's relentless pursuit against her prey, and a hint at her role in Leviathan's demise. And up next, we have this goat-like creature with horns that remind me of Loki. In Jungian psychology, a goat usually symbolizes independence, a connection to nature and the unconscious, untamed, difficult to confront aspects, and hard to control aspects of the self. With a snake on its head, however, it could also represent something like sin and themes of rebellion, turning it into something closer aligned with Lucifer in Gnostic beliefs. Lucifer in Gnosticism gave humanity the ability to rebel against a false divinity and seek out the true God, becoming more like a tragic hero as opposed to an enemy of mankind, though, of course, a lone snake itself can simply symbolize transformation and integration, but with the context of where she is from, so too does the context of the symbols she has change. Now then, let's move on to one that I've been struggling a bit with. We have this harpy-like figure, but it could just as easily be a siren, a Lilitu, or even Lilith herself. Some people say it's a statue of Nike, but I find that unlikely. But it does fall in line with war and themes of victory, which is very Septimonian. Let's focus on only one of these and choose the harpy for this video. This represents things such as rage, grief, and lament, but also hunting, fighting, death, and, to a degree, even rebellion. The harpy is like a punishment from the gods, one that can hunt and slay whom they need to. The rebellion aspect comes more so from the people than the harpy itself, as fighting the harpy is almost like fighting fate. These are all feelings that would be very commonly felt in all Renacida, with the Dark Tide itself being seen as a punishment from the divine itself. Let's move on to the snake, which we can all recognize as deceit, lies, and even betrayal, but it goes much deeper than that and vastly different than traditional interpretations. A lone snake above Galbrena symbolizes a looming, overpowering, and all-encompassing force, such as Leviathan and the Dark Tide. However, one thing we also need to keep in mind is that she has an Ouroboros on her, and that is quite different from a normal snake. This suddenly becomes a symbol of cycles of death and rebirth, much like what Galbrena might have felt with the Dark Tide during that unique resonance she achieved. This is a symbol of integrating the opposites, a symbol of integrating the shadow into yourself. In other words, a symbol of individuation. The most key aspect of her is this snake. It is infinite, whole, the raw symbol of transformation, of which Galbrena underwent, and of course of which many resonators undergo when achieving their own forte and resonance. Though, with Frolova, we know it's possible that you can still have your forte and fall victim to your shadow, to fail at integration, so who is to say that she has fully succeeded? Who is to say she doesn't literally operate in a cycle? Perhaps she will cycle through each of these echoes with Ouroboros as her true core. Maybe this is her core self, with the others representing aspects merely of civilizations affected by the Dark Tide, or even just Septimont, Lilyland, Raguna, the Riccioli Islands. There are 4 unique locations within Renacida itself, after all. However, as a little bonus content, it was brought to my attention by Fat Fluffy Penguin, who makes amazing videos by the way, links to both Life Lessons and Fat Fluffy Penguin down below. Anyway, it was brought to my attention that Galbrena might have a chimera. So what does that symbolize? Well, it's kind of a mixture of things, to be honest. Wild instincts, it challenges the notion of a singular and coherent self. perhaps meaning that Galbrena and Angel are actually separate entities and not the same person renamed. It is the fusion of disparate and conflicting parts of the mind, radical self-acceptance of contradictions, and the acceptance of the shadow aspects of the unconscious. Essentially of parts you don't even know about your shadow. It's unstable yet exceptionally powerful, and falls in line with something I've believed in for some time. As in this point onward for the Chimera, it is not just Jungian psychology, but an expansion of modern science and understanding. That the mind and self are not one whole entity, but are rather several different conscious entities mediating with a central construct we call as awareness, or what Carl Jung would call as the conscious mind. For a better understanding, think of it like this. We have a justification part of the brain that activates constantly when judged or challenged, a so-called gut brain that can inform us of hunger and seems to have its own memory of its own. It's a true separation of all aspects of what you consider yourself, and then the intentional understanding of each aspect, and acceptance and integration. However, one clarification I must make is that the awareness is what Carl Jung would call the conscious mind. It is your inner monologue, your thoughts and what you are currently focused on. There is more to it than this, but think of it like a bridge to Jungian psychology for the time being. Now, onto the second idea. This one is much simpler and requires only understanding Rover, as this is, in essence, saying that her body allows her to act like Rover's does, meaning she absorbs echoes directly into herself, and that each of these she has obtained was defeated, forced into submission, and then absorbed by her echo in her plot of revenge against the Threnodian. Which of course means any symbolism behind these creatures falls more in line with where she obtained them than if they are from Renacita itself or not. Perhaps the other tacit discords are swallowed by the core one, much like with Abby, and therefore giving Galbrena access to them in some sort of a way, and oh my god. They're going to power creep Rover's attribute swap, I can already tell. That said, since tacit discords are born from emotions, what I said previously may still apply in some part here. Galbrena would leave Renacita behind, hunting down powerful tacit discords to absorb them, use them, and eventually gain enough power, experience, and time to defeat Leviathan itself. So far, we really only have Abby to work on, so Galbrena might be the name of the echo inside of her, and Angel is still just her name, with Galbrena being able to swap between the different abilities they have gathered across their journey, just like Abby. The question I have is, if it consumes a Threnodian, if she consumes Leviathan, will this cause a second resonance awakening? And speaking of Leviathan, we do see Galbrena going to fight Cartethiya. Let's go ahead and speak on that and offer some predictions of how the fight might go. I'll be honest, Cartethiya is not at all in danger of dying, nor is Galbrena. From a narrative perspective, I believe this will serve more as a telling for us of how powerful Galbrena actually is. It doesn't make sense for either of them to die, though perhaps Cartethiya may become severely wounded and not able to actually fight Leviathan. No, the real threat, I believe, lies in Cristoforo, as he has Leviathan. Imagine for a moment all of Renacita getting together because Cristoforo uses Leviathan's gem, or perhaps because Cristoforo gets what he wants from Leviathan and then frees it. Perhaps empowering it and allowing it to wreak havoc with the Journeying Paradise. That we will have a biblical level event. Something akin to Overthrax's invasion of Zhenzhou and that battle with Jian. With all the themes of Christianity, Rome, and Europe itself, I find it hard to believe that we will not be fighting something akin to the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, or perhaps not as grand as that, but something biblical in scale, almost as if the end of the world were happening right there in Renacita. Who knows, maybe the four echoes Galbrena has are representative of the Four Horsemen, and she acts as God's righteous judgment against Leviathan instead of mankind. However, what of Scar and Ovidius? Well, as cruel as it sounds, I kind of hope we fight Ovidius as a boss fight against Cristoforo, where Cristoforo is puppeting him like Frolova did with Hecate. Would that not be beautifully tragic? At any rate, I think that the Fraxidus members may play a bigger role in Zhenzhou as Qi Yuan seems to be from Huanglong. Perhaps releasing Leviathan is part of the plan to distract Rover there while they deal with something else, take something from elsewhere, or perhaps they bring Overthrax back to fight Zhenzhou once again. Rinasita is not the only place facing issue and hardship. The fact we are getting another Huanglong resonator tells me one thing. Something is arising in Huanglong. Something malicious is brewing. Whatever the case, there's one thing we know for certain. Galbrena is the righteous hand of God, the devil Leviathan forgot, the purger of the dark tide, and demonic savior of mankind. Just like in Gnostic belief, Lucifer in this instance isn't the one who damned them, but the one who gave it the ability to liberate itself, as Lucifer did so to give humanity the ability to seek the one true God, in essence, becoming his messenger in a battle against the Demiurge, against a false divinity. And of course, the name Gabrielle is messenger of God. As for what her mind is like, we know that Galbrena hears a voice of at least one of these, but imagine if she hears all of them. Perhaps these cycles I was speaking about earlier is literal. We already have Camellia, Cartethiya, and Phoebe who switch between states. What if Galbrena does the same but with 3 or 4 different choices? Perhaps swapping with her forte. I think that her liberation is likely to stay the same, however, but it would be cool if she technically had like 4 different liberations, each named after each tacit discord within her body. However, it's time for my schizo posting to come to an end. What did you all think about Galbrena and the connections with Jungian psychology and Gnostic beliefs? Do you think I'm onto something here, or do you think I've spent too much time farming echoes and have fried my brain completely? Whatever the case, let's start a discussion and be sure to join our Discord server, where you can often see these theories being made in real time. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace out. Special thanks to Ice Dragon, Icy Sincere 13, Frosty Frog OG, Takoyaki Lover, and Wolfmaster 256.